All right, so question 3. What was the primary purpose of the laws of cleanness? And I was talking to Jesse about this. I don't know if that's a word or not, but it's a word that describes, and so I like it. So we'll use it for now. These laws of being clean as opposed to being unclean. What was the primary purpose that God had in mind? And I gave you a couple of scriptures there. God's primary reason for coming up with these particular laws. April?
The overarching theme of the book of Leviticus is be holy for I am holy.
Okay.
So that's the primary purpose is setting apart God's people as he is holy.
Okay, so this idea that if I'm going to live amongst you, and it's more like if you're going to live in close proximity to me, it's kind of equally on both sides because God's making a choice there. God has chosen this people with his plan, and he is choosing now to live amongst them, but he's giving them the conditions that are the only way that that's possible. And that's what we're talking about here. He's holy, so they have to be holy if he's going to live amongst them. What is the other side of this also that goes along with this? Because God is a righteous judge, we know that this is the mercy part here is, and his grace part is making the decision that he loves us and wants to be among us. But what's the justice side of God tell us? Did I see a hand right there? Melissa, no. Oh, is that? Oh, no, that's Regina with her left hand going up there. That was involuntary, right? What does God's justice demand? If we aren't clean, Cole?
Well, he can't abide evil, so he has to destroy it.
Okay. So he is not going to tolerate any change from that. He's given us the conditions. He gave them the conditions, and he's not going to tolerate any uncleanness amongst the people. And there's going to be consequences associated with that. And so the other thing I want you to think about with this is these laws of cleanness are basically going to be physical examples of differences between God and Israel and all of these other gods and the other peoples of the world. There's going to be a vast difference that will set Israel aside and apart, separate them from the practices of all the other people in the world. You could say that was a type, couldn't you? What does God demand of us as his children? And he's always demanded of his children. Come out from amongst them and be separate from them, not separate from me, not separate from God, but separate from them. And only then can you now show the examples that will draw, again, people. If you're living the word and you're a living example of that word, isn't that in essence what the Old Testament does for us from a physical standpoint to help us understand the spiritual? And isn't it the spiritual kingdom that we're part of? And isn't that what we want people to belong to? So yes, so you can see all of that. So the primary purpose was to do all these things. That was first and foremost. Question 4 then, what's the secondary purpose of these laws? Because there is a secondary purpose. God many times in the things that he does just doesn't have just one reason for doing it. Many times he teaches us in many ways on things that we're supposed to do. Very serendipity, let's call it. Other things that naturally work along. Because remember, he's the creator. And these are physical laws that he is demanding that his people follow. So is there a physical counterpart to that primary purpose up there? What is he going to do? These laws, now, if Phyllis was here, and I think she's amongst us right now as we gather together, but this was one of her favorite things to talk about. We called her the witch doctor a lot of times. It was because she took a lot of these things seriously to study into these laws and see what kind of practical applications there are in our everyday life. For what? What was that, April? For health reasons, yeah. When you talk about the practices that are going on here, those of you in the sciences from TTU and those that are nurses and things, how healthy is it to be around a dead, decaying body? Tiffany's going, no. How common were dead, decaying bodies in the old world? Well, people only lived to 20, 30 years old. There was a lot of dead, decaying bodies around and stuff. They didn't know how to deal with it. The idea of taking the potty that you put together, and if you're out in the field camping with some army somewhere, and you put it upstream from the camp, what's going to happen, Norm? Dysentery and all kinds of other things. Yeah, it's going to contaminate the drinking water. These are things that God, as the Creator, knew the system that He put in place. And He has a special people here. He doesn't want them to die. He doesn't want them to go through what Egypt went through with the plagues and the diseases and all of that kind of stuff. And so this is part of that. But what else does it teach from a spiritual standpoint that's a secondary purpose here associated with this? If Israel did not follow these laws, one of two things would happen. In most cases, both. If God sees it, and as the righteous judge implements judgment on them at that time, what would happen to him? The individual that broke the law. He did. Okay. All right. Separated, sometimes permanently from the people. But what else would happen? What would be a consequence of these people breaking these laws? Besides getting sick. What's it teaching them? What does God want? What does God want these laws to teach us? Us looking back on it now, 4,000 years back that way. Okay.
Comes blessing.
Okay, with obedience comes blessings. We have all of that. Is there a consequence to disobedience? And the answer is yes. With obedience, there's blessings. With disobedience, there are consequences that are ugly consequences. If you break the physical laws associated with disease, you get the disease. If they were unclean, they got leprosy and things like that. But there was also the physical example that if you break that law, there are going to be consequences to it. And you can see what the consequences are. They got sick. They died. Nadab and Abihu. There's consequences. Okay? So these are all the things that are wrapped up together in what seems like something, this seems pretty trivial. Isn't God just being trivial? Making them do all this stuff, Well, is He? Well, let's just see. So question 5, what promise was God keeping with these laws? And turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 7. Deuteronomy 7, whoever gets there first, in verse 15, can read that.
And the Lord will take away from all sickness and none of the evil diseases of Egypt, which you knew, will He inflict on you. but he will lay them on all who hate you.
All who hate you. Wow. I don't know what happened to the army of the Assyrians that were around Jerusalem as they lay siege and everything, the first invasion, first missed invasion. But they all died. How did God do that? Did God have the power over this world and everything that's in this world? Yes. Yeah, and he had the power of miracles, and there's all kinds of things. Think about the Black Death in the Middle Ages and how many people that killed. Were the people of Europe following these cleanliness laws during then? No, it was a filthy place to live back then. They hadn't learned a thing from it. So again, these laws are there, and this promise is something that God set up. He wanted to live amongst his people. He wanted his people to be separate from the world. He wanted them to be this bright and shining example to the world. Okay? And so this is one of the ways that he did it, was with physical examples. Okay, let's look at question 6. Failure to follow correct procedures for cleansing was counted as sin, even if one were unaware of the defiling of himself. Once it was brought to his attention, what was he to do? Confess it. Okay, yeah. Leviticus 5 and verses 2 through 6. Confess his sin, and then the sacrifice that was brought along was a female lamb or a goat to the priest for a sin offering, and we've seen that before. Okay, so this was you could see that there was no excuse for the breaking of the law, but there were remedies that God put in place that if you stumbled and fell, broke the law, and you were unaware of it, and it was unintentional, there were remedies for that. Intentional sin, a little different, okay, the way that rolls out. We won't get into that right now, but let's just talk about these ones. Question 7, what characteristics determined whether an animal was clean and so could be eaten versus unclean and could not? So let's look at the clean stuff, and we'll give you the first one. Split hoof and chewed the cud. What else was... What other kinds of animals and features were involved in clean animals? April, go ahead. Give me one.
For like water animals, if they had fins and scales.
Fins and scales. So those of you that like trout and bass, those are good. They're good to eat, right? And what else? How about those? Oh. Ugh. How about those little things that crawl around on the ground and hop? Boom, 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 boom. Like grasshoppers, and what other would fall in that category that Egypt experienced a lot? Locusts, yeah. My dogs think the cicadas fall in that, but those are not hopping with. They have to have jointed legs for hopping, so the cicadas wouldn't. No, and cicadas make dogs sick, because I could vouch for that every morning. That's bad. Okay, so how about the birds?
You can eat most birds.
Okay, most birds. What specifically, I mean, very pointedly, would be kinds of birds that would definitely not be on the list?
Yes.
Yeah, anything that ate Tiffany's favorite topic back there, dead bodies of anything. So does that make sense? Well, sure. Well, even if it didn't, it would still be something you follow. But it makes sense, and scientists and people have, again, looked at these things, and medical science used to start with the Bible and then work out from there in trying to understand the universe we live in. But this is another one of them. Yeah, not good. Okay, question 8. Who determined whether someone or something had leprosy or not, and when, if ever, and who was it that told them that you're clean? The disease has been eradicated. Yes, the priest. Okay, so, and the priest, when we're talking about the priest, who are we talking about? Aaron and his sons. Those are the priests, right? Okay. So let's go to question 9. What does Peter's experience in Acts 10 tell you about God's purpose in establishing these laws of cleanness under the Mosaic law? So now what we're talking about is Acts chapter 10, verses 12 through 15. Now let's go ahead and read that. Acts chapter 10, verses 12 through 15. And again, whoever gets there first. Acts 10, 12 through 15.
Kinds of four-footed animals of the earth, wild beasts, creeping things, and birds of the air. And a voice came to him, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "Not so, Lord, for I've never eaten anything common or unclean." And a voice spoke to him again the second time, "What God has cleansed you must not call common."
New American Standard uses the word unholy. Yep. And so, how does this illustrate God's primary purpose for the clean laws, the cleanness laws? Were all of these things unclean that were looked at as clean before? Were some of them, no kidding, unclean, bad for you in every aspect? Some of the animals, yeah, that were mentioned on the list, the different lists. Yeah, and the answer is yes to both, right? I mean, the laws that God set up associated with his creation and us, I mean, this is time is a small piece of eternity, right? So God's laws are eternal as far as from the standpoint of working within the system that God works within. And so you've got these laws for specific purposes at specific times to teach specific things. And that's the thing we need to remember. And this was what Peter was having a hard time with, was the idea of a change happened. But was it really a change, or was God teaching a different lesson? Are the laws that God put in place under the New Testament a change in God's perspective, whatever? Or is he just teaching a different lesson? Yeah, in the same way that the same principle that you as a father or a mother may be teaching your toddler may at different points in that toddler's to that adolescent to that teenager to the young adult, it may be the same principle and the same lesson, but may be taught in a very different way. Based on what? On the maturity of the student, right? And we've talked before about, again, what are the Israelites and the Mosaic law and the Mosaic period is kind of like rowdy teenagers, you know? And God's dealing with them as such in that. And again, we can take lessons from that as parents and as grandparents in trying to consider how we want to get the lessons across to our children. So, what does it reinforce? This idea that obedience is what God's looking for. Okay? And however he can teach us that, he needs us to learn that obedience, in other words, faith in action, is what we need to live by. And the secondary purpose of the cleanness laws could still be valid. There are still, and again, Phyllis would be pounding the Bible, with her fist on this one. There are still things in here that if you do them based on God's creation, you're going to be better off. And those, so it wasn't just, do it to teach one thing. It was, in there for our good on this earth and eternal. And then it cemented the fact that, there we go. Cemented the fact that the new covenant in Christ's blood was the culmination of God's promise from the beginning. So this wasn't, Christ dying wasn't some new idea that God had down the road, as some people in the denominational world may want you to think about. No, this was from the beginning. The plan was from the beginning. All of it was from the beginning to teach us and to lead us to Christ. And so when we, how do we know that? Well, you can look back at these scriptures, for instance, as you go back into the Old Testament. Satan and Christ, and the looking forward to that battle which is going to happen. And in Genesis 12:3, we have all the nations being blessed, and Abraham is being given that. Hey, you got to think, well, Abraham, that wasn't, the depth of that wasn't getting through to him at that time. We know he grew a lot as he went along in his life with his spiritual understanding and everything. But still, that's a bit of a jump to lay that on him at first. But it never changed, did it? Even through all of his progeny, same message, simple, but it was the same message. Ephesians 3 and verse 6, where the Gentiles are going to be fellow heirs. And in Galatians 3:14, through Christ, all the blessings that we get through Christ are the blessings of Abraham to the Gentiles. I mean, Abraham, because he did the right things in his life, he was able to be a positive part of God's plan. Just like you and I. If we want to be a positive part of God's plan, can we do that? How do we do that? How can we be a positive part of God's plan for eternity today? Obedience, yeah. Live by faith. That active obedience to God, and we can be part of the positive part of that. Can we be the negative part? Can we be the downer? Can we be the one that turns souls away? Well, sure we can, yeah. We can, just like these guys had the choice of obeying or disobeying. It was much better when they obeyed. All right, so we're on, that was lesson 17. We're on to now lesson 18. And we're going to be talking about these special times, and there were a lot of them. There were a lot of animals, and Waldron brings this out beautifully in the book. There were a lot of animals that shed a lot of blood to put this idea that sin is disgusting, that sin is a separation from God, that it is filthy and just any word that you can think of that would be ungodly. I mean, it doesn't even touch the hem of the garment, so to speak. And so all these special times were set up to keep this fact right in front of them at all times. So let's go to question 1 here. Describe the offering given by the priests daily for the whole congregation. And again, we're going to get into some detail here in this lesson, but not all the detail that the Bible brings out, because you're going to notice that there are a lot of similarities between, we've already learned that about the burnt offerings and the sin offerings and the grain offerings and the drink offerings, and the bigger the animal, the larger the offering of that particular thing and all of that. So God consistently uses that to emphasize the importance of these different things. So we won't necessarily go, but we'll, in a couple of places, we'll just test you a little bit, all right, for that. So we're going to start off with this little test right here. Okay, so the priest daily had to do something here and provide an offering to start with, and then other offerings that might go with it. So what was the kind of offering that the priests had to bring out from the herd daily?
It was to offer 2 male lambs, one in the morning and one in the evening.
Okay. What kind of offering? Yeah, what kind of offering is this?
Blemish and
Well, that's on the animal. You're right in everything you've said so far, but what category of offering did that fall into?
It's a regular burnt offering.
Burnt offering. Okay, right. In this case, the assumption is that again, this is being brought for everybody, so it's the whole congregation. You're assuming that with this that everybody's right with God right now. Okay, so the burnt offering is to do what? What does the burnt offering show? How's the relationship with God with a burnt offering?
is it a sin offering?
No, it's not a sin offering. Separate offering for sin. And when would you do the sin offering? Before or after the burnt offering? Before, because you want to get right with God, right? And then the burnt offering. So you're right with God, and you're in that relationship with God. So what does the burnt offering do? I told you I was going to review this over and over until you get it.
Sweet smelling aroma?
Sweet smell. Why is it smelling sweet? Remember, it's all about the relationship, right? These offerings are an indicator of your relationship with God and how you feel about it, not how He feels about it. Francis?
It's where you are showing your gratitude that you've been blessed.
Right. We're into the thanksgiving and gratitude, and that you want the relationship that's right now to continue that way. You're dedicated to it. You're committed to it. That's what the burnt offering shows, okay? And so that's why there's no sin offering associated with this daily one right here. There could there be a sin offering prior to this? If there was a reason for it, right? But just, this is the, hey, everything's going good. I'm in a relationship with God, and I want to thank Him for it, okay? And so you have the burnt offering. And so now we're into what Ken was talking about, the 2 male lambs. All of them were unblemished. All of them were a year old. All of them were males, except for some very specific ones we'll talk about, or maybe not. But it says if it's a female one. But and then one was in the morning, and one was at twilight. Okay. So now, all right, what kind of offerings go along with a burnt offering? Okay, what's the first kind of an offering that would go along with a burnt offering? A grain offering. Okay, so and since we're now talking about things that you do in the right relationship with God, you're now into the sacrificing of something. It's your grain. You're bringing it. You're offering it. Okay, and it's very specific. The bigger the animal, the bigger the offering. So 1/10 of an ephah is the smallest, and you would expect that because this is the lamb, right? Okay, so, and then you have a 1/4 of a hin of beaten oil. Notice the detail that God is putting into this. The exact amounts of specific things, okay? He's not going to do that all the time. And then the next one then, after the grain offering, what goes along with the grain offering? Got that barley's sticking in my throat right now. A drink offering, yes, okay. And so the drink offering, and All that they say about the drink offering is that it's a quarter of a hin. And so basically, it doesn't give you the what, it gives you the how much. All right, and there's some reasons for that, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Okay, so question 2. Describe the offering given by, now that was the daily offering. Every day, the priest did that for the congregation. Okay, every day. 2 lambs gave their life, plus some grain and all that good stuff. All right, so that now describe the offering given by the priests on the Sabbath. Okay, when was the Sabbath? What day of the week was the Sabbath? Saturday, which was of a 7-day week. It's day number 7. Okay, all right. First day of the week, Sunday, we just need to remember that, because as you start counting up different things, numbers of 7s and everything. What does the number 7 represent generally when when God uses it? The Holy Spirit uses a number in the Bible. What does the number 7 generally represent? Completeness. Okay, so it's a holy number that is looked at as the idea of completeness and things. So, and we're going to see other numbers used, but you're going to see 7 a lot show up in this. Okay, so on the Sabbath, then, basically what happens is the same offerings as you had for the daily offerings is also given on the Sabbath day, okay? So you started out with the daily offering, and then you added the Sabbath offering, which was exactly the same as the daily offering. So now we're up to 4 lambs as we look at it. Because this was in addition. These offerings are always cumulative as you look at them. And why is that? Why are the offerings cumulative? What part of you being right with God can you leave out when you're thinking of leaving things out? What part of his plan is okay just to kind of pass by and leave that one? Because I did something similar to it over here. Isn't that enough, God? Yeah, nothing. You can't leave. And so they're cumulative because they all have different purposes. This one is what God wants you to do to remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy part. All right? You still were living daily, okay? And so that had a different purpose. And so everything that God has in this has a purpose to remind us of something. And he doesn't leave anything unturned here. All right, so question 3. Describe the offering given by the priests. Now, are you ready? Here we come. The monthly offering, the one on the new moon, okay? And this is, again, for the whole congregation. So as we look at this new moon monthly offering, is why I wanted to throw in, because we use these terms a lot, these Middle Eastern terms, and we're not familiar with them that much. So in the dry measures, the ephah, just to give you an idea, is a bushel, or what we in English talk about as a bushel or a peck. My mom used to sing a bushel and a peck and a hug around the neck. I always wondered what that was. It was an ephah. Oh, that wouldn't have helped. 6 to 7 pints. Now, that wouldn't help me. Okay, so about 6 to 7 pints worth of flour or grain. Whereas a hin, that's a liquid measure, okay? And so a hin is a gallon, or I have to put the quarts up there because I could never remember. I usually embarrass myself when it gets to how many quarts, in a gallon. But so a hin is 4 quarts or 1 gallon. All right? So now, as we look through, for the new moon, what would you expect would be, for the daily offering, you had what? A burnt offering, a grain offering, and a drink offering. For Sabbath, you had burnt offering, grain offering. For the new moon, what would you expect would be the first thing that you would have here? Yeah, you would expect the same thing, and you would be right. That's right. Because again, you're dealing here in this part of the calculation. You're in a good relationship with God. God's walking with you. God is amongst them. Okay, everything's fine. So, now, but we want to remember that the new moon, the month, is now ended. Okay, and there's some things that we need to do. So there's a burnt offering. And in this case, there were 2 bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs, again, unblemished, 1 year old for the lambs. And this was in addition to the other stuff. If it happened to be the Sabbath day, I mean, it was going to be the daily offering no matter what. If it happened to be the Sabbath day, that then you'd do the Sabbath one also. And then you do the new moon one on top of that. So you can see the animals are adding up. All right, so for each bull, again, now, I want you to, we're going to go through this fairly quick because I want you to see the comparison. For each bull, there was a grain offering, a drink offering, as well as the burnt offering of the bull. And you can see that 3/10 of an ephah of fine oil, of fine flour, same amount of oil as before, half a hin. So a half a hin would be a half gallon, right? Okay, half gallon of drink. Okay, so then the ram, now 2/10 of an ephah and 1/3 a hin. You see it going down? Smaller animal. Each lamb, grain, 1/10 of an ephah, 1/4 of a hin. Okay, so you see what's happening? See what God's doing there? And a lot of this, ultimately, of course, the consistency belongs to God as far as what he's doing and the reason he's doing it. But ultimately, God's laws are made to be followed. These offerings come out of the herd. The priests get them because these are congregational offerings. But if you were an individual bringing an offering, if God made what you had to bring, you got to bring $6 million worth of, well, I don't have $6 million. God made everything so that we could do it. Sometimes it was a strain to do it. Sometimes you had to go to the alternatives that he talks about to do it, but you could do it. And there was always ways of making that happen. And so it is here. And so you'll notice when you look at those other offerings for the individuals that we're going to look at down the road in a little bit, it deals with that ability of the individual. Because you don't want to change the offering. You're not changing the offering. You're changing what is required for the offering based on the individual and what they can afford to pay. Okay, does that make sense? All right. It's like our government talks about trillions of dollars like it's just nothing. Unless it gets above a B, they don't even. That's like a placeholder. For you and me, $10 is $10. So, again, congregation versus individual. All right. So just this note, and I wanted you guys to see this, and I'll read this because it's from me. It's about the drink offering. And I scratched my head on it a little bit, did some research, and this is what I came up with. If you read it in a different way, this is purely how I understand this. So if you read it in a different way, please see me afterwards, and we'll talk about that. So some of the elements of these sacrifices would not be available until Israel settles in the land of Canaan and are able to gather the crops. And you'll notice that as you go through. Some of them are after you have settled, do this. And there's some small changes to that. For example, Numbers 28 and verse 7 in the New American Standard says, "In the holy place you shall pour out a drink offering of strong drink to the Lord." Now the King James Version renders this to be strong wine. The Hebrew word for strong drink is this word sikar, which is most often translated strong drink or strong wine. The drink offering that's mentioned here in Numbers could only be done upon their entrance to the land of Canaan, where and when God would require the preparation of wine for the drink offering. in Numbers 15 and 5, that is God's command and directive for them to prepare the drink offering beverage, the libation, once they enter the land, okay? So remember, this strong drink was to be poured out on the altar, not drunk by the priests, which are clearly prohibited from drinking wine or strong drink, as we saw in Leviticus chapter 10, verses 9 through 11. So also notice that there is no specific recipe for the drink offering, only the amount, whereas God is very specific about the ingredients and the nature of other things, such as the oil, the grain, the incense, etc. So this gave more or less wiggle room for the contents of the drink offering until the Israelites were in the promised land, where they can fulfill the command to, as it says in Leviticus 15:5, prepare wine for the drink offering, for the altar. Okay? What were they drinking in the wilderness? Were they drinking wine from fruit of the vine? They didn't have any. They weren't camping and putting vineyards down and yeah, they were drinking water. Okay, is water a drink? Yes, but it's not a strong drink. Okay, so that's why this when it talked about the strong drink there in Numbers 28:7, notice that is in Numbers. That's in the book of Numbers. The book of Numbers was after they have gotten into the land of Canaan, okay? So basically, you just want to, don't let somebody pull something like this out of context and say, look at that. They were told they had strong drink. They had strong wine. And the priests were even using the strong wine. They must have been making wine all over the place. What's wrong with wine? Well, again, when you bring the chronology together and what the priests were prohibited to use and to do and everything, it makes sense. So I wanted to bring that up here, just so in case somebody else. I saw that in there because Waldron sent you to Numbers 28 for that particular example of pouring out the drink offering, and it said strong drink, and I went, whoa, what are they talking about there? And then so. Again, if you have another reading on that or another look on that, please see me after class and whatever. And if I'm wrong on this, then I'll make it right next week. All right, that's all. Thank you, guys. We're going to start with question 4 next week.